All right, so in this section, we're going to actually look at the payoff for all of that research and preparation we did when we actually start to design our weapon. So our first step here is going to be to just draw the basic shape of our weapon. I've got a gray canvas background so that I can draw with black on top of it with a transparent brush, where if I press harder, I get more pigment. If I press lighter, I get less pigment. I use this as my basic sketching brush because it not only allows me to draw something fairly loose, but I could also shade parts in if I want to. In the brush packs I've provided for my students, that would be, I believe, Marker Standard is the one that I'm using. Let's find out. Is that Marker Standard? Yeah, it's Marker Standard. But you can use any brush that you want. The idea is that we just be able to loosely sketch and draw. I'm also going to do this section in Photoshop as opposed to Krita because I'm more comfortable using my movement and transform tools, which we're going to use quite a bit. So I've got my reference up here in the corner. I've got my written out notes down here in my lower left-hand corner. I've got my Photoshop interface. I actually have two monitors at home, but I'm putting all of this on screen so that you guys can see it in the video. But if you have two monitors, take advantage of that. So first step, I'm just going to draw the basic shape of this weapon, the way that it kind of appears in that reference. I picked a fairly simple shape to start off with, just because that's a good kind of base level. When we start to embellish and make things a little bit more interesting, then we're going to get really creative and start mixing and matching pieces. And I've got a whole folder full of reference to draw from now, but this first step is just kind of going to be the template, and I'm going to draw over it and change parts of it over and over and over again. So what I decided was the difference between a I think it's called Kopesh or Kopis type of sword. I know that it's Kopis, but I heard the guy on YouTube was saying Kopish over and over, so I'm not sure if I'm wrong or not. Is that this back goes straight across from the back of the handle and then dives down. And sometimes it does it in a curve, sometimes it does it at an angle, but it doesn't seem to really go up and then down very much in the depictions of this weapon that I saw. You do sometimes get a curve underneath like this one from the crossguard, and it seems to either flare out towards the end and come to a tip, or kind of slowly descend back into that tip shape. So I'm going to try to just generally represent that as close as I can, and then worry about making it more specific in the next few design iterations. So just going to clean this up a little bit, not really too much, because this doesn't need to be a clean drawing at all. This is entirely for my benefit of iterating my design ideas. And so don't really take your time drawing this. Just be careful enough to get a basic representation like this one. I've also drawn fairly big. That's fine. You can do that or not. So this would be the first step, is I've just got like this template sword. So now I'm going to copy this sword a few times down in a row like this. And I'm going to try to change parts of it based on what I can find in my resources here. So if I click, I don't know why it's doing that. I don't want to, there we go, okay. I had to click for some reason. My mouse pointer was making it edit this. So I'm going to take a look around. So like here's a heavily bent version of it and a different handle, which I might take. Here's a fancier handle. So let's start with that. So for the second step, I'm just going to kind of play around with the shape a little bit. So we've got a deeper cut here and a straighter overall blade shape. It looks like this one barely drops at all towards the end. It also looks thinner throughout. So I'm just editing. Oh, I need to merge all my layers. So all my layers are now merged down so that I can just draw straight over the top of what I had before. So this one looks a little bit ugly. It's a bit thinner and pointier overall. So there we go. And the handle I actually like a lot. So I'm gonna get that wooden kind of handle like this. And it looks like we've got two pieces of metal on either side. And then this bird head thing is perfect for the kind of theming that I was going for. So I'll just quickly sketch that in as well. So this kind of curving pommel, kind of slash finger guard because it comes all the way around like that. Get rid of some of this up here, and this kind of chunkier metal shape up here is pretty interesting. Let's see, so that's like it goes back in this direction, comes up and across, and it's a little bit bigger, which is fine. And it looks like, oh, the blade even kind of like comes down in this direction. That's kind of neat. Gets cut off right about there. So not really being too careful about this. You can't see a, I think it was a fuller is what it was called throughout the blade. I didn't see a fuller on many of these Kopis or Kopish weapons, and so I'm not going to put one. It means that the blade is either sharpened in a taper all the way back here or towards the end. There's maybe this little edge that gets sharpened, which you'll sometimes see on like a cleaver, is that you have this kind of weird area here. That's where the blade, it was thick and it got thinner right at that point. So it was sharpened down into the cutting edge. But again, this would be something that you might do in research, is to find out like, hey, how does blacksmithing for blades work? How does the shaping of this metal work? So there's a slightly more interesting shape. So let me keep going. That's a really great one. So this is an entirely kind of crescent moon shaped one. And here we do have a very pronounced and easy to spot place where the blade is sharpened. So then I'll go ahead and get a little bit closer. I might have to rotate my canvas a little to draw this more comfortably. So this one comes way down like this, and it's actually, it initially pops outward like that, and then sort of follows this line down and then sweeps back up. This may technically qualify as a different blade, but I'm not going to be pedantic about it because I'm just looking for inspiration for something fantasy. So if I end up making something that is not literally a Greek Kopish or Kopes, then I don't really care, because this is going to be a part of like some fantasy story. It should be inspired by those things, but we don't have to like slavishly stick to historical accuracy when we're not working in a historically accurate setting. If you are working in a historically accurate setting, I would remind you that typically we work in entertainment, not museums. So you can definitely change that stuff as well. It does rankle some people if you call something historically accurate and then you don't stick to perfect historical accuracy, and I get that. I just wish people wouldn't claim that. They would just say that it was historically inspired instead. This handle's really neat. It kind of comes down at an angle slightly, kind of following the blade, and it's wrapped many, many times kind of loosely like that. And then we can see at the end we've got this cool curving, almost filigree tail like this. Comes up and around, which I like. I kind of like that. So I'm going to get rid of some of the distracting elements and make this look a little bit rougher right here. Fill those back in so that we got this appearance of being roughly wrapped. And that's about it. Also put the place where the sharp part of the blade separates. It looks like it goes just behind the tip up here, which is probably different than how these other blades would work. They probably go all the way up to the tip, but that's okay. So there we go. There's step 2, right? We've got our 3 different variants so far. So we're just kind of adding some variety. I could start shrinking these blades down and adding even more variety if I wanted to, or I could move on to the next step. You should probably do a lot more exploration than this when you typically try to design something good, because you never know what's going to catch your eye, what's going to be interesting to you. So let me move this up a little bit, and I'll just do like a couple more quick ones here. Start by copying my initial blade, put it down here, and it looks like I do need to probably shrink all these just a bit so that I've got enough room to play. Put that down there. Okay, so I'm gonna shrink down here. I don't like having this little amount of drawing space. It's a little odd to me, but I'll make do. So pop through. So there are a lot of, I add more to this reference library when I ended the video, but there are some feather shapes in here as well, because that is in line with the concept. That's a really great one. Oh, and I didn't realize, but this looks just like Sting from, what is it, Lord of the Rings? Or was that the name? I'm thinking of the Frodo's weapon. cool looking dagger. That's a great handle. I'm going to draw that handle, even though the blade is pretty wrong for this application, because the grip is so nice, kind of a parrot head or something. So we've got this wider shape that curls down into a knob like that. Gets thinner towards the neck, wider towards the attachment point. Let's see. Something like this. And it looks like the beak comes all the way down to face the original direction like that. Then it's even got these kind of swirly, filigree details up at the top here. Get rid of that. Kind of like this. Sure. Kind of a nice thing. And so I'll give him an eye, and I'll just scribble in some like feather details or whatever. That's what that one is like. But let's find a different blade, because that's just clearly a dagger. I could try something feather shaped like this. It's a little uncomfortable, I think, for this type of weapon, but what the heck, let's give it a try. Oftentimes, if I'm going to draw right over something I have, I'll either take that layer and reduce its opacity entirely and draw on a new layer, or I'll just erase out a little bit initially. So let's see, if this came out and then down like this, like that feather does, and then this one came out and then came back up like that. So let's see. That doesn't really look like the original weapon anymore, which is a little unsatisfying, but I could probably figure out ways to tweak this eventually as well. Yeah, maybe by pushing this farther back like that, or like this. Okay. So this is a whole step that you can follow as long as you want, keep exploring. You'll probably find that you'll start to prefer certain patterns and shapes. Like I think I did this earlier, and I found that I really like this third pattern of blade, this curving over shape. And I just kind of kept going back to it again and again. And that's fine. That's kind of a natural part of what's going to happen. This one I could give a fuller in the middle to kind of simulate that feather shape. And I'm really not liking the overall shape of it, so I'm going to block it out one more time and then try coming in here. I do have to rotate my screen. Try one more time to get a nicer sweeping shape. So that's pretty good. Unfortunately, I think I'm creating a dagger kind of look, but it does look cool. And so the rule of cool is, if it looks cool and it's a fantasy thing, disregard your other rules and just go with it. Okay, so that's not too bad. I do want to show one other method that you can use for this early kind of exploration. Let me grab this one here, and I'll just make a new layer, paste that in, and duplicate this a few times, like this, and then merge all those layers together. Okay, so I'm going to grab the top one, and this is more of a Photoshop technique than a drawing technique, but you can transform and just move these corners around to get different shapes, right? So we could lengthen or shorten the entire thing. You can see it's completely destroying parts of the drawing back there, but it is a valid way at least to get a start. I'm holding down Control to do this free kind of transformation, but up in Edit, Transform, you could set this to Distort Perspective, or Warp is the craziest one. Just be careful which one you pick. So I'll hit Enter for that. So that was a nice kind of overall transformation just to get a new shape. You can also do this just with parts of the weapon. So we could take the Marquee tool and drag just the blade, transform. And so now I could have a bigger or smaller blade, put it at a different angle, or make it flare out at the end or thin towards the end. So if I wanted this to be longer and straighter, like that, or flare more and angle more. Be a little bit careful about how we drag this start, but there we go, flared more and angled more. or who knows what. Let's try the warp feature, even though I'm pretty sure it's gonna start to like bend the blade in ways that I don't want. So this warp feature is like a whole lattice grid on top of what you've already got. The benefit is that you can shape just certain parts of it completely differently. Like for instance, there we go, I can get an underhand kind of swing on the tip of that this way. So I can have it come out fairly straight and then dive down like that, which really does look like a different weapon, but it does look cool also. And so this basic kind of transformation, oftentimes it doesn't look very satisfying and you're gonna have to clean up parts of it after, but just draw over the top. So I'll just clean up some of these things. This definitely needed to have a thicker handle after that transformation because it's starting to look really silly. The blade itself I'm pretty okay with. This long one, thin one, I think it looks fine the way it is. I might just give it a little bit more heft on the tip like that, just with a little drawing. Okay. Down here, this one I think actually looks pretty great. The handle is starting to look too big by comparison to the blade, so maybe I'll just take this in one more time, transform, and just lengthen that out, or something like this. Yeah, just made it a little bit bigger, but it doesn't really need a draw over. And then this last one barely needs anything, but I like the fact that it suddenly dives down from that point to a tip. I think I'll exaggerate this curve a little bit, like that. And then get rid of the parts that are no longer working for me. So this one just a little bit more steep. And so that's pretty nice. I don't know how this would work here, if I should put like a corner here or not, but that's what this experimental phase is for. Like if I just draw straight through both of them and then erase out and give it a sharp edge right there. Like, is that what I want? Or did I want the more curving shape? I mean, that's interesting, but now it looks less sword-like to me. So I think I did prefer the more curving shape. So I'll go back to when it was nice sweeping angle, because for some reason that's a little bit more satisfying. Maybe it's more bird-like, maybe it's not. Okay. So that would be the first kind of phase of shape exploration. I've got all of these different things going on now, and I probably want to start getting them onto a single sheet because I'm going to do a lot of mixing and matching next. So I'm going to shrink both of these down to fit on my canvas. I tend to start really big and then just shrink things down if I don't have to worry about size. And in basic kind of shape exploration, you really don't have to worry about the size you're drawing. As long as your drawing tools are not going to start looking blurry, you're fine. This document that I'm working in right now, I think is a 300 dpi, yeah. So 300 dpi, 10 by 10 inches, so 3,000 pixels. It's way more than I need, and so I can shrink things quite a bit and they will still look nice and sharp. I'll combine both of those down to a single layer. And so this would be an example of like the first big step of iteration in exploring your design. In the next video, we'll talk about mixing and matching details and focusing down on what our specific concept is.